Good afternoon and good morning to those of you out west. Welcome to today's democast from the Construction Specifier and Henry, a Carlisle company. My name is Farheen. I'm the Associate Editor for the Construction Specifier, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Just to cover a few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions during today's democast, please enter them using the Q&A section, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom window. We will address as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Zoom does have a raise hand function, but since we'll be keeping everyone's mics muted, only use the Q&A instead. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties during the democast, you can enter a message in the chat, which you'll find right next to the Q&A, and we'll do our best to help. Today's democast is being recorded and will be available on the Construction Specifier's website by this time next week. Now, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Bart Rowland. Bart is the Director of Product Management for Henry, a Carlisle company. He has more than 20 years of experience with a focus on waterproofing, civil construction, and roofing. Bart has authored articles for engineered waterproofing, water containment, and water management. In addition, he has also been involved with high-profile waterproofing projects and sales efforts throughout North America. He has led product launches and commercial efforts throughout his career, developing key customers and relationships in the Middle East, Africa, and India. In this democast, Bart will discuss Henry pre-applied waterproofing solutions. This webinar dives into Henry's risk-based portfolio, including MiraClay, Blueskin PreSeal, MiraPLY, MiraWELD, which are 4 time-tested systems designed to fit every risk level. It is a primer on how to match your project's unique needs with the proven risk-based solutions. Bart, thank you so much for joining us today. Please take it away.
Thank you, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone participating in this webinar. And as mentioned, this is a primer. There's a lot of information to cover in pre-applied waterproofing applications, but the ultimate goal is to show the risk mitigation and risk tolerance flexibility that certain manufacturers like Henry have to help guide you on the product selection, because not all products are suited for every type of application. And it's with that breadth of the portfolio that Henry, a Carlisle company, can provide you a custom solution based on the risk tolerance as well as site conditions. So I'd like to start off by talking through several of the challenges of pre-applied waterproofing. There's numerous challenges that we're going to go through: substrates, shoring methods, as well as exposure. And all of these things can impact product selection. But one important point that I want to focus on as well is the quality assurance tools, because it's not always product related that can help ensure that your building is dry. There's certain quality assurance protocols that will help ensure and select the necessary requirements to make sure your job ends up dry, as well as you select the right product for the application. There are certain risk factors that we're going to speak to, and we're going to speak to how those risk factors can help you select the right product and working with a manufacturer that can provide you the right products for your application. And I'll start off with a little bit of definition, if you will. Pre-applied or blindside waterproofing, you'll see that these are used interchangeably throughout the presentation. And pre-applied waterproofing as a whole is installation of waterproofing prior to the application of concrete. Typically, you're using a substrate such as soil or gravel or a mud slab prior to the concrete being placed on top of the waterproofing membrane, or you could be using some type of shoring like a sheet piling or soldier pile and lagging, or even shotcrete for the membrane to be applied to prior to concrete placement. Really, you're only using a single-sided form to help make sure the concrete is placed correctly. So these are some guides for today's discussion. There are post-applied waterproofing applications, and that would be a separate discussion, but there's certain technologies that we'll speak to can be used in both pre-applied and post-applied applications. You've got a photo here of a pre-applied application where you're tying into an existing structure. You can see that the MiraClay product in an under slab application, you can see a little bit of standing water on top of that concrete that's already been placed, but this waterproofing membrane will tie into the wall and the structures around the side. And this is not uncommon to see the utilization of this type of space in urban areas or areas where there's existing structures and just trying to maximize that particular space. Another example here, you can see a photo where you've got soldier pile and lagging, helping maintain the excavation so the site does not collapse upon itself. You can see active streets with street lights above it. So this is where an ideal pre-applied waterproofing application would take place. You would apply either a drainage composite on top of this shoring and then a waterproofing membrane, or if the substrate is suitable, apply your waterproofing membrane directly to the substrate. Here's an example of an underslab application, and this is important to note that you see this reinforcement steel on top of the concrete, on top of the waterproofing membrane. This is very important because when you have the waterproofing membrane exposed for an extended period of time, it's going to be exposed to UV as well as debris, and then ultimately reinforcement steel. A number 4 rebar piece dropped into a membrane can cause damage. You can see the concrete's been poured over part of this exposed waterproofing membrane with a concrete pour to take place at a later date. These types of sequencing is very important to understand how and what type of waterproofing products you should use on these types of sites. Some of the challenges, the substrates, and there's a number of them regionally. There's certain preferences, soldier pile and lagging, there's auger cast caissons, as well as there's other types of sheet piling that are used in certain areas. And these substrates will help guide you on what type of technologies you want to use. And I want to point out, if you can see in the photo, there's plywood on the face of these corrugated sheet piling. The plywood will provide you a very plainer and smooth application for the waterproofing membrane. One of the challenges, though, is that plywood adds to the cost, or could add to the cost. Additionally, if you put your membrane contouring around the inside of those sheet piling, which is common, it may require some additional detailing. So that means more tapes or mastics could be used wherever the membrane's cut to make those contours. And that could also drive up the cost, but further increase your risk. So these are the types of things, working with a company such as Henry, you'll get a better guidance on what type of technologies are best suited for this type of substrate. And there's groundwater conditions where dewatering wells need to be active. And then you've got heavy rain in certain areas. This is the lowest point on a job site, so all sorts of debris and water are going to end up on that site. So how that affects your waterproofing membrane will be very important in your overall considerations. And as I touched on earlier, sequencing of trades. There's a lot of trade traffic that happens on a job site, people dragging reinforcing steel, plumbers, mechanical, electrical workers that are trying to get their job responsibilities done. You need to make sure that the membrane is going to be sufficiently robust to handle that type of job site traffic. Some of the other challenges you can see with the substrate itself, membrane being placed, and then you've got a lot of intricate details. You can see the struts and whalers that are placed. One thing that's very important, that at some point during the construction sequence, after concrete's been placed, some of this steel needs to be removed. So it's usually burned off. What type of detailing and how does that impact the existing waterproofing after it's been installed? Working with a manufacturer such as Henry will help you select the appropriate detail or provide the solution that will allow for the right detail to address that type of condition. Because ultimately you want to have a continuous, defect-free waterproofing application. And the term blindside applies because you won't get a second chance. You're putting the membrane onto a shoring or substrate, concrete's going to be placed. You don't know if it's going to be perfect, but you have an opportunity throughout the installation to make sure any type of damage or sequencing can be coordinated through a pre-construction meeting, and everything gets addressed before it's covered in concrete. Because if it's covered in concrete, it can prove problematic at a later point, and then ultimately remediating could be very costly and time consuming. So when you think about the subgrades as well as mud slabs can add to the construction cost. So if there's an opportunity to value engineer, typically mud slabs can be removed. Now, mud slabs as a whole are typically a lean mix concrete, and they may not always be in the best condition. Some will be in very nice condition, but ultimately that might require some additional surface preparation, which can delay the schedule as well as could become costly. Subgrades such as number 57 stone or compacted soil, that also gives you a great substrate for your waterproofing membrane to be placed on top of, but to ensure that the subgrade is properly compacted may require some additional evaluation. That's where some of the quality assurance pieces incorporated in your specification can be of value, because that will help maybe with a third-party inspector validate that the compaction and the subgrade are in suitable condition to install the waterproofing. Because if you look at this holistically, the speed of an installation in an overall construction project is very important to several parties on that job. You want to make sure that that speed or zeal to complete the project quickly doesn't compromise something as important as pre-applied waterproofing. And I touched on this a little bit earlier, but with the wall substrates, you've got a supportive excavation, sheet piling, slurry walls. There's a number of different types of applications, and how you can detail those most effectively to not become problematic at a later point. When you have to remove wailers and cross bracing, how you detail that afterward is very important. Tiebacks, soil nails, they have a certain problem in various projects, and you want to make sure you detail them correctly. Is it a very labor-intensive detail, or are there prefabricated tieback covers that you can use on top of it to ultimately reduce your risk while ensuring that continuous defect-free waterproofing product? Henry Carlisle Company looks at the risk factors and risk tolerance on projects through working with the design team and understanding what the ultimate goal or the end use application is, and that helps drive the product selection. There's not one product that we're going to use for low risk to high risk applications, or we're going to take a technology and then we're going to make it thinner based on the type of application. We have a wide breadth of portfolio which will allow us to select the appropriate technology based on the information we have on the project. And we look at this a couple of ways. If the end use application is a parking structure or an occupied finish, there may be different drivers to product selection. Slab thickness, if it's a thin slab area, it's going to be easy to repair should there be damage or debris. If there's a thicker slab, then you really need a high puncture resistance type of product. And that's going to steer you towards more of the high performing technologies. And last but certainly not least, water. On-site water, is there water there? Is it a seasonal? Is it a high hydrostatic condition? That's going to help you select a product to make sure that it's in the best position to keep that building dry. And there's another piece too, such as environmental requirements. Methane, radon, harsh contaminants in the soil. The different products have different types of performance in these types of conditions, and you want to make sure you select the right product. One of the key differentiators or an industry evolution, if you will, is the lateral water migration. And most credible manufacturers test their membrane to ASTM D5385, which is the universally accepted resistance to hydrostatic pressure. Within the last 10 to 15 years, the lateral water migration test is more driven out of practical implications of what happens on a job site. When there's a breach in the waterproofing and there could be water bypassing the membrane, getting between the membrane and concrete, is that going to be easy to remediate? In certain types of attachment methods for membranes, such as mechanically attached, water can move and it's very difficult to localize. So where you see the water might not be where you have to fix the water. So that's where a lateral water migration test is very important. And right now it is not a standard test, but the ASTM is looking to standardize that test because multiple manufacturers have developed a method where they can test their membranes, but there's no one uniform standard that they're all measured against. So the ASTM committees are going to be looking to standardize that with various input from manufacturers to make sure that when everybody is measured against that standard, the data will support the utilization of those types of products. And here's a couple of examples of if there's a crack through the membrane, a crack in the concrete or damage to the membrane and water bypasses the membrane, you can see some of the types of tests that will help show how you can remediate it should water bypass the membrane. Now I would like to focus a little bit more on the different types of technologies that I touched on earlier. For pre-applied or blindside applications, MiraClay is one such solution that can be utilized to solve low risk or medium risk applications. MiraClay is based with a bentonite mineral, and the bentonite mineral is comprised of sodium montmorillonite, and it's compartmentalized between a woven and non-woven fabric. It's needle punched together, and it's used to self-seal and self-heal on various job sites. You mechanically attach it, so you would staple it together, shot and pin into shoring. And then because of its active nature, where water comes in contact with the bentonite, it will swell. And bentonite will swell up to 15 times its normal size in an unconfined situation. But under confining pressure of concrete, as well as a compacted subgrade or a shoring, it creates a hydraulic barrier which is impermeable, so water cannot get through it. But it's a very unique technology and has a mechanical attachment to concrete. It's been proven for hundreds of years as a myriad of applications, and it's a naturally occurring mineral. So it does have some challenges if it comes in contact with certain types of conditions. So there's enhancements that can be made to the product to ensure it performs on various types of applications. You can see here 3 different gradations of the product. The EF is an enhanced formula product, which incorporates a polymer which helps the bentonite swell in harsh conditions, as well as the gas mitigation formula, which relies on a high density polyethylene film, which will help protect the bentonite from certain contaminants in the soil that might impede its ability to swell and keep water away. But the entirety of the MiraClay product gives you a wide option based on site conditions to select the right type of technology based on your challenges on a job site. Here's a couple of photos where you can see a MiraDrain project. And for those of you who haven't been on a pre-applied application recently or ever, you can see it's not the most nice site. There's a lot of dirt, there's debris, there's a lot of dangerous pieces. So safety is very important. You also have to make sure that when you're looking at a certain project that you know exactly what's going on. And you can see this drainage composite in place, MiraDrain. Waterproofing is placed on top of the drain board. And this is a great application of the mechanical attachment you can see in the other photo. You can see the membrane is in a horizontal oriented place for that wall slab transition. Then you've got it switching it over to a vertical application coming down, and the scissor lift is allowing for that vertical roll to be unrolled. It will be mechanically attached to that drain board. So the MiraClay product will serve its purpose on certain applications. Working with a trusted advisor such as Henry will help recommend when and where this is the right product for your project. Here's a couple of additional photos. You can see a nice aerial shot of a large, deep foundation where you can see the MiraClay installed. You can see that the concrete is already poured prior to the walls being cast. And that's going to vary based on the sequences of the project. And you can see the other photo, we've got some Nelson studs that can be detailed with some MiraClay mastic. I now want to focus on the Blueskin PreSeal, and there's 2 different gradations of the Blueskin PreSeal product. What makes this very unique is the dual bond technology. It's a polypropylene plastic membrane with a polymeric saturated geotextile, which is embedded into that polypropylene. That polymeric saturated geotextile will have a mechanical bond, so you get the immediacy of the bond of that mechanical material, and then you can get the long-term performance of the adhesive bond, which is the polymers that are saturated within the geotextile. It's a very unique technology. It has the 2 different thicknesses, which I'll speak to in a minute. But because you have that dual end mechanical bond, you get a very robust bond to the concrete. It does have lateral water migration resistant. It's got very strong puncture resistance because it's a passive technology. It's a rigid plastic, but it's easy to work with because it does have a wider roll, and I'll show you some photos there. It also is cost effective in certain situations because you do have more usable material per square foot with a 2-inch overlap versus a 3-inch overlap with certain products. Here's the 2 different thicknesses of the material. You can see the Blueskin PreSeal 320 is a 32 mil system, as well as Blueskin PreSeal 435 is a 43.5 mil system. Both products are very lightweight. They have 2 different sizes, typically a 3x3 by 65.5 or a 6.5 by 65.5 meter. Rolls. You can see they're very lightweight. They do both resist high hydrostatic conditions. They both have lateral water migration resistance, as I mentioned earlier, and you can use these interchangeably. Typically, the 320 is used on walls and 435 is used under slab in certain hybrid situations, but both are standalone waterproofing opportunity products that can be used with a 320 on wall, 320 under slab, 435 on the wall, and 435 under slab. The 435 could be used for very complex installations such as shotcrete applications, which for those of you on the call, shotcrete is often more challenging to waterproof than, say, your traditional cast in place. I want to focus here on these photos of this under slab application. You can see the reinforcing steel. You can see the tape used to detail and the overlap. There is a selvage edge within the membrane itself, but you also can put some additional tape seams for the inlaps. In high hydrostatic conditions, you can do enhanced detailing to ensure that the material performs its intended use. And in these types of situations, high puncture resistance is very important. And that's where the puncture resistance for Blueskin PreSeal is over 225 pounds force, which gives you that confidence that if the number 4 rebar is going to be dropped on it, it's going to perform. It's not a risk. But again, speaking to the quality assurance importance, you always want to have inspectors and a well-trained installer ensure that the material is put in its best position to perform. Here's a couple of photos that actually show you a vertical wall application. You can see the prefabricated tie-back covers, as I mentioned earlier, but I want to focus on the width of these rolls. A 6.5 foot wide roll shows how you can reduce the overall number of seams on a project without increasing risk. These rolls being very lightweight, rolled down and covering up a lot of the area, they can accelerate the construction project, but without creating additional risk to the installer or the end user. MiraPLY, and both Blueskin PreSeal and MiraPLY are kind of in that moderate risk depending upon the application, but the MiraPLY product is an even more robust technology. It's a 70 mil product. It's a TPO with a butyl alloy adhesive, similar to PreSeal, where it's got the selvage edge, so it bonds to each other, utilizing its seam lock technology. The MiraPLY product also has a strong resistance to lateral water migration, has a definite performance against hydrostatic head pressure, and it has a tenacious bond through its adhesive bond to the concrete. It's also a very strong, high puncture resistant system, even greater than Blueskin PreSeal at over 300 pounds force. So it's a very strong puncture resistant product, ideally suited for very thick concrete slab applications. There's 2 different grades of the MiraPLY product, MiraPLY H, MiraPLY V, and they're horizontal and vertical respectively. The vertical product actually has a release liner, which would be removed, but that tackiness of that vertical product can bond to concrete really quickly. So it helps ensure that adhesive bond that I mentioned, which is critical to this MiraPLY product. It's very installer friendly, and you can see how robust it is. You can see the applications where you've got a lot of trades storing their materials on top of it, which is great given that 300 pounds force capability. Now you've got a long-term performance of the membrane, which will not be compromised. You can see it's also easy to detail with these pile caps. You can see it's a tape seam system like the MiraPLY product, the Blueskin PreSeal product. In that tape seam, there's a detailing tape as well as a seam tape, as well as a number of accessory products that will help ensure the product is detailed and performs correctly. Moving on to the MiraWELD, this is where you take all the physical properties of the MiraPLY and you enhance it even further with a welded seam. This patented technology with a welded seam gives you an adhesive bond or full bonded system with a weld, unlike some of the other products on the market which are welded, but they don't have that true integral bond that the MiraPLY and MiraWELD do. It has incredibly strong puncture resistance like the MiraPLY, and you can also put a detail tape on top of that welded seam so you have a true belt and suspenders approach, because you may not get that second chance to keep that membrane and that wall or under slab area tight. That toughness that I mentioned, very important, because of thick slabs, trades, everything that I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that that material can withstand inclement weather, harsh job site conditions, and third-party damage as much as you can. The welded seam, there's different types of equipment that can help with welded seams, handheld welders, automatic welders. This is very important because this relies on very skilled and well-trained labor. So it's different than some of your mechanically attached systems or your tape systems. This is usually a select group of contractors that are very well trained by the manufacturer, such as Henry. So you can see here some photos of probing the seams. Again, a great opportunity for a third-party validation on a job site is to probe seams or ask for documentation from the installer that he's been trained by the manufacturer to install this type of material. You can see here on these photos, thick rebar slab, as well as you can see the release liner and tape on the photo on the left. Then you would have the photo on the right where you've got the exposure to rain, and the seam integrity is there. Close up of that thick rebar, and you may see that air horn. That's okay, that will be removed. And then you've got your similar exposure, performance, and harsh sites. And you can see the added precaution of coordinating the trades to walk through a certain area with that walk pad, which is ultimately going to help the membrane perform throughout the project. No waterproofing or pre-applied application would be complete without considering the full suite of the system itself. And I want to talk about the water stops. And so there's a number of water stops that Henry, a Carlisle company, offers, and that's our bentonite water stop, non-bentonite water stop, Syncoflex, and the injectable water stop. And the injectable water stop, I'll touch on that because that's truly a form of insurance. But I would look at all water stops as a low-cost insurance for a project. The bentonite-based technology is a very widely accepted technology, which it swells when it comes in contact with water, can fill some poorly consolidated concrete, a wall slab, or around penetrations. Similarly, the non-bentonite water is a chloroprene rubber, which will give it greater chemical resistance, but it's still very much a hydrophilic technology, so it will swell in the presence of water. Syncoflex is much more chemically resistant than some other water stops, but it doesn't have a swelling capability. But it has great job site survivability because it's bituminous based. So this can be used in various applications such as potable water confining tanks. The MiraStop SS, that's a swellable sealant. That too can be a standalone waterproofing, but it's also can be relied upon for additional detailing to make sure that the waterproofing in an intricate condition has an additional level of assurity around, say, a pipe penetration or reinforcing steel in a shotcrete application. The injectable water stop, as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, it's like a low-cost insurance. This is there where you put it into place. If there's water ingress, you can come back and address that water ingress at a later point. And here's an example of where that's of value. You can see the tubes that would be accessible after the application, maybe a little box where you can come in and inject your grout at a later point through the MiraStop CGF or the CGHS. But this gives you an opportunity to fix it at a later point should there be a problem. But it's at an ultimate low-cost insurance because you got the opportunity to fix it now versus trying to remediate at a later point where there's a lot of drilling through the wall, which can become very problematic and extremely costly. MiraDrain, I showed a photo earlier of the MiraDrain in place, and that MiraDrain can help facilitate substrates. It can also help manage your site water, and there's different types of plastics, polypropylene, polyethylene, but the MiraDrain product is a great tool to help ensure that the water is managed correctly into a drainage system, or just to help ensure a waterproofing membrane is actually installed correctly and by having a suitable substrate. As I mentioned earlier, it's not all about products, it's about the overall quality assurance. And the quality assurance is very important when you think about the specification itself. What other than a product can you weave into or incorporate into your specifications? An applicator, geotechnical review. This is kind of a trusted partner where you have a manufacturer that you can rely on to provide you quality information and help guide you on that project journey. Pre-construction meetings, make sure the expectations are set at the beginning, as well as the third-party inspections that I mentioned to help ensure that the intentions are met throughout the project. An approved applicator, I think this is a very important piece, and this is why I'm here in Carlisle, Pennsylvania today at the Training and Education Center. It's very important to point out that manufacturers have true, credible training programs, not just site demonstrations or exhibitions where they show material at a yard or the approval of, say, low bidder just to get the project. A manufacturer accredited training program is a very strong quality assurance specification to help you and your customers make sure they get what they pay for. Another example is this geotechnical review, not one product for every application, but understanding the site conditions to make sure that you get the appropriate level of waterproofing performance based on your particular site conditions. That's where Henry can be of value to you, providing you this type of technology, this type of support on an active project. Third-party inspections, this is where you validate everything that's been discussed, the quality of the manufacturer's manufacturing process, the quality of the product being installed, the quality of the installer testing the material, installing the material. You've got an objective evaluator trained by the manufacturer to make sure that everything that you've asked for and specified is getting delivered. This helps everybody address situations when they arise before they're covered in concrete, which is ultimately a concern if something goes or gets past that team. Now it becomes a problem, and it could be very frustrating for the design team as well as the owner if their project has water ingress. So if you incorporate all of these quality assurance principles as well as high quality products, you give yourself the best opportunity to mitigate your risk on various challenging pre-applied projects. And in summary, this is kind of how we look at applications where we can see our low-risk solutions up to our high-risk solutions, MiraClay, PreSeal, MiraPLY, and MiraWELD, because we have multiple solutions based on the technologies and your site conditions. As I mentioned earlier, we're not going to take one product and try and shoehorn it into every type of application. We want to understand the application before we make a product recommendation. I'd like to now show some actual examples of the material. You may be able to see me in with the actual material behind me. I want to move towards our MiraClay product. You can see the fibrous nature of the MiraClay. You can see the needle punching. This is a wall slab transition area with just for mock-up purposes with the mechanical attachment up close. The wall slab transition base area. Your sheet coming down from the top and tying into the next one. So this is your lower risk application. Then moving on to the Blueskin PreSeal, you can see it's a tape seat instead of the self-sealing, self-healing MiraClay. It also has a selvage edge, which you can see here, and it can be mechanically attached with tape over top or detailing on top. Here's an example of our MiraPLY product with that integral bond of the adhesive as well as the MiraPLY V, where you remove the release liner and you get that integral bond with the concrete. Here's also an example of a critical waterproofing system piece, MiraStop EVW. And last but certainly not least, the high-performance solution of MiraWELD. MiraWELD is your thermoplastically welded system. You can see the added detailing tape on top of you to truly give you that belt suspenders type technology, which will give you that infinite bond between that detailing tape because it also has an adhesive on it, which bonds completely to the underside of the concrete. But you can see we have a full suite of pre-applied waterproofing solutions. We're here to help, and we'd love to take questions now or work with you on any type of project that you have where we can be of value with our pre-applied waterproofing solutions, in addition to the entirety of the building envelope solutions that we offer as well.
Thank you so much, Bart, for that excellent presentation. Let's hop into the Q&A.
Okay.
We have an audience member who wants to know, in the slide of the blind installation of MiraClay, was the application correct? It appears that the overlapping at the joints should be at the top overlaps, the top overlaps the bottom.
This is a great question because it's often a source of debate because where's the water coming from? Is the water coming up? Is it coming from the site above? And that's where understanding those types of site conditions, if it's a dry site or if it's a vertical ground level water sourcing into the basement, how you would detail that. I think the important piece in that particular photo, that's a photo where based on that particular site, that was the appropriate method. Now, there may be other methods based on hydrostatic pressure from the underside where the detailing would go behind the membrane. So that's where understanding the application, as well as consultant preference and market requirements, that helps us tailor our approach to provide the appropriate solution without increasing risk.
Thank you so much. The next question is the high perm rating of the Blueskin PreSeal, which is above 5, please correct me if I'm wrong, qualifies them as permeable barriers. Is there a trade-off with the duration of weather exposure during construction?
Well, what's great about the Blueskin PreSeal product is it has a UV exposure rating of about 120 days. Now, let me emphasize, covering up your waterproofing as quickly as possible is best practice, but in certain delays within construction, 120 days, it's going to still be that same watertight membrane that you're going to need throughout the construction sequence. Because that typically UV exposure can be very detrimental on certain technologies. UV degradation can affect adhesives. It can also, with rain, it can cause premature hydration in certain active types of technologies. But the Blueskin PreSeal, that longer term job site survivability does help it ultimately in various challenging applications.
Thank you so much. And the last question I can take here is, under below-grade horizontal waterproofing, generally what compressive strength insulation is used?
Again, that also varies based on the application type. In a low risk or a slab on grade type of application, 40 or 60 psi may be used, but then there's other applications where an 80 or 100 psi can be used. It really varies based on the project and where that project exists. I mean, expansive soil applications where they use void forms, that's a little bit different than something that's going to have a high clay content compacted earth. So that's one where you can work with our sales team and our technical team. We can provide you the appropriate recommendation.
Thank you so much. And just as you were speaking, another question came in. Can you speak on the repair methods for blindside clay failures?
Blindside clay failures? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. So typically, blindside clay failures would be remediated with an injectable resin. That could be a polyurethane base. There's also other types of technologies that can be injected. In certain applications where you can't access it from the exterior, you're going to have to drill through or into the wall at an angle to inject the urethane grout or to fill in that void. Some of the challenges with clays as a whole is, typically there's a mechanical attachment. So this is where that lateral water migration discussion comes in. So if there's water showing through concrete, when you inject, you might stop the water at that particular area, but water is incredibly patient and it can move to another area. So you may have to mobilize again to do injection work there. That's where it comes back to the quality assurance piece, trying to put as much attention on the project when you can identify potential damage or a seam that may not be sealed correctly. Maybe concrete got in between the inlaps or overlaps. So that's where you want to make sure that you have some additional eyes and ears on a job site to help make sure that the material is installed correctly or that it wasn't, in fact, damaged prior to concrete placement.
Thank you so much, Bart, for answering, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. That was all the time we had for questions. If you need to reach out with any additional questions, Bart's contact information is currently up on the screen. Just a reminder before everyone leaves, if you would like to rewatch today's presentation or share it with a colleague, we'll be emailing the link to the recording to everyone who registered for the democast within a week, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Finally, after you shut down Zoom, you'll be taken to a survey to provide feedback on your experience today. Please take a moment to complete the survey as it helps us to continue to serve your needs in the future. On behalf of the Construction Specifier and Henry, a Carlisle company, thank you again for joining us and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.